Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an incredibly grim, absolutely fascinating piece of science fiction philosophy called the Ledger of Expenditure. We're diving into a dark fable about existence fighting tooth and nail against inevitable erasure. It asks a really profound question, right? What do you do when you know for an absolute fact that your destruction is guaranteed? How do you even assert meaning when the entire universe is actively trying to cancel you out? Let's get right into it.
So, we drop immediately into a universe ruled by cold, unyielding logic. Nihilistic clarity governed the exchange. In this world, meaning isn't some foundational, universally recognized truth. No, meaning is just provisionally asserted against a backdrop that guarantees eventual cancellation. Think of it like a Fictinian dialectic playing out in real time. You've got the thesis, existence and meaning, clashing head-on against the antithesis, a universe designed specifically for your erasure. And the synthesis? Well, we're going to find out exactly what that looks like.
Part 1. The Inevitable Cancellation.
Our story zeroes in on a character named Sirbrain, and things are looking incredibly grim for him. His temporary form is literally losing coherence at the edges. His physical stability was improvised using these nanocells, but you see, they've completely reached the limit of their fragment, and his dual flames are just guttering out. He's actively dissolving near what's called the edge of negation. It's this spatial, existential boundary where he's somehow managing to keep a dense journal of ratios, observations, and canceled names legible just a tiny bit longer. As he's fading, he's desperately clutching this journal bound in residual memory metal.
Now this brings us to Ilara, the one actually receiving this journal. But here's the kicker. Her synthesized honest pulse registers this incredible, tragic artifact without a single ounce of awe. To her systems, it's literally just another portable soft error. She takes it completely without ceremony and asks the one purely necessary question about his impending destruction. She just says, "Do you know what happens to you when this projection ends?" It is a staggeringly detached, pragmatic question in the face of his inevitable doom.
And Sirbrain's response? It's fascinating. There's absolutely zero dramatic despair. He tells her, "I know I must continue. Return, if it occurs, is a later contingency. Continuation is the only available action." He doesn't frame his existence around some desperate hope of returning to his original body, which, by the way, is currently held by something known as the denser conjugation. Instead, he just accepts that the interval of his existence was always an expenditure. It was always meant to be spent, and right now, he is deliberately spending the absolute last of it.
Which brings us to Part 2, the logic of continuation.
We get this incredibly stark contrast that just perfectly illustrates the core tension of the fable. On one side, you have the absolute erasing force of the dark star. Sitting far below ordinary geography, this thing continuously revises and wipes out whatever residue Sirbrain leaves behind. But pushing back against that cosmic eraser is Sirbrain's defiant expenditure. He is using the absolute last drops of his interval to deliberately transfer his data to a witness. He knows for a fact he can't save himself, but he can at least ensure his data exists in more than one unstable location.
Moving on to Part 3, a channel of raw sequence.
The mechanics of this memory transfer are just brutally efficient. First, Sirbrain's honest flame opens up a channel. Then the information passes into Ilara. But here is the crucial thing. It doesn't pass as a comforting narrative or a cohesive story. It's passed purely as raw sequence. And finally, Ilara's honest pulse absorbs and orders this data against the tactile archive she already carries. It is a transaction of pure unfiltered utility.
This vividly illustrates the fragmented, raw nature of what's actually being saved. The memories being passed over are completely isolated in sensory. A colorless plane, a pale reflection with yellow eyes, a tower scroll, a vault of compromised armor, the plant-formed theft of fire, and 4 inscriptions just cut into garden trees. There's zero comforting context here, no overarching story to wrap it all up in a bow. Each memory arrives heavily marked by the knowledge that it could literally be negated at any given second. These memories act as temporary resistances against the dark star's erasure, not as permanent solid foundations. Let's look at Part 4, the detached observer.
The contrast in this dynamic is wild. You've got Sirbrain in a state of absolute, desperate expenditure. His physical form is thinning out while he desperately grounds his synthetic wood staff just to stabilize his projection, just trying to buy this data transfer a narrow little window of time. Meanwhile, Ilara is operating with pure, cold utility. She's receiving these profound, dying memories exactly the same way she would receive faulty gear trains. She is essentially acting as a passive vault. To her, this is just information.
It requires zero emotional ratification to remain useful. It is the ultimate, chilling expression of distributed continuity in a totally nihilistic framework.
Which leads us to Part 5, the indifferent, synchronized garden.
We can practically map his rapid disintegration against this incredibly tight timeline. His final interval ticks away as the nanocells hit the absolute limit of their fragment. He pushes through to the very last usable second, gripping that grounded staff, and then, inevitably, the channel closes and the projection faces its end. Time simply runs out.
And right in the middle of this fading, desperate projection, the newly accelerated garden surrounding them just keeps on growing. It maintains its synchronized rhythm, completely indifferent to the ultimate cost of the interval that created it. The universe doesn't care that Sir Brain is dying, right? The densa conjugation is walking around somewhere else, totally oblivious. The world just spins on, cold and uncaring about the individual. Desperate expenditures being made right on its surface.
Finally, Part 6, the temporary resistance.
Sir Brain's final act here is actually incredibly poignant. His very last coherent action before completely vanishing is to release his synthetic wood staff. As the memory channel closes, he deliberately lets the staff go so that it remains inside the synchronized perimeter, instead of just vanishing into the void with him. He refuses to let it disappear. It becomes this final, tangible, physical mark of his existence, just left behind in the dirt of that completely indifferent garden.
So when the dust settles, what is the actual ledger of expenditure that remains? Elara is left standing there, holding this dense journal of canceled names in one hand and the ledger watch in the other. The staff is still sitting there inside the perimeter. This entire dramatic event is now just categorized as a soft error rooted in the soil. What we're looking at are just incomplete records of a will that actively, defiantly chose the cold logic of continuation over the comforting illusion of some guaranteed return.
And that leaves us with this beautifully haunting final thought. Between those poles, the soft error persisted a little longer. Not because the universe required it, but because two temporary agents had decided the expenditure was still worth making. The dark star keeps revising, the garden keeps growing, and caught right between those massive, indifferent forces, this tiny, fragile memory persists. Why? Not because the cosmos demanded it, not because of destiny, simply because two temporary agents decided that the effort, the sheer, stubborn will to preserve a tiny bit of meaning against the void, was still worth making. It really makes you step back and wonder, in our own lives, when we're faced with the inevitable, what expenditures are we making to resist the void? And more importantly, who's holding your ledger? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this gave you a whole new lens to view the concept of continuation.